He didn't even look up when I walked in. Just gave me that recruiter smirk, too polished, too sure of himself, and flicked his pen once toward the folding chair in the corner. Not even the conference table. "Consultants here," he called without checking my name. I didn't correct him. I just sat down and opened my binder. I'd seen this room before in different zip codes and tax brackets. The kind where people mistake silence for weakness and polish for power. My name is Danielle Reed. But here, in this over-air-conditioned glass tower, I was vendor support. Compliance backup. A late-stage add-on from the firm hired to streamline a government-adjacent infrastructure deal that had ballooned past $470 million. I wasn't here for recognition. I was here because someone upstairs realized that if this deal got audited post-close and failed compliance, the fallout could eat careers. Maybe even land someone in court. But that wasn't my job to warn. My job was to notice. Quietly. If you're listening right now and stories like this catch your attention, real ones about power plays behind fake smiles and whispered corrections in boardrooms, hit that subscribe button. 97% of people don't. And every like or share genuinely fuels the team that brings these moments to life. Now let's get back to the room. The project lead was a guy named Travis, mid-30s, half-zipped Patagonia vest over a designer button-up, still wearing the name tag from some VC mixer like it was a badge of honor. He glanced at me once during the meeting, maybe twice, but not like I was part of the team. More like I was the typo someone forgot to remove from a slide deck. What they didn't know was this. I'd reviewed every line of the provisional contract before even walking in. Every comma splice, every timing clause, every footnote about procurement thresholds and jurisdictional triggers. And what I saw? Sloppy. Rushed. They were trying to move this thing fast, too fast for the federal oversight it technically required. Probably hoping no one would raise a flag before the ink dried. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I just asked for the shared drive credentials and waited while Travis audibly sighed. "It's in the onboarding doc," he said, already moving on. It wasn't. I checked. 3 times. By day 2 it was clear how this would go. The recruiter, Jonas by the email signature, kept referring to me as support staff, in threads where I was the primary recipient. He sent agendas that never included me, even when the topics were directly in my scope. During one sync he literally said, "Let's just not waste time looping in compliance this early." I was in the room. He didn't care. No one pushed back. I wasn't new to this. I'd learned that people who overlook you are often the ones who leave the biggest gaps. And my job, my actual job, was to know where the gaps were before someone with a badge and subpoena asked the same question. So I nodded, took notes, and started building a folder. Not on them. Not yet. Just on the process. Version control. Missed sign-offs. Document edits with no history logs. I told myself I was doing this out of habit. I told myself I wasn't taking it personally. But I'd be lying if I said something didn't shift when that first email landed in my inbox by mistake. A message I was never supposed to see. From Travis. Sent to Jonas. Subject line. Dead weight check-in. Body. Still no idea why that Danielle woman's even on this project. If legal's forcing her on us, fine, but keep her quiet. She slows things down. It was a mistake. I was CC'd on a scheduling thread and someone forgot to remove me before the snark started flying. Happens more often than you think. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I just opened my personal compliance log and dragged the email inside. I'd already labeled the folder. Insurance. It happened during the Tuesday alignment call. 10 minutes in, camera on, 37 attendees dialed in. I had just finished summarizing an issue with their vendor data format. Something that would have blocked compliance on 3 of their 9 core deliverables. It wasn't an opinion, it was a federal rule. I barely finished speaking when Jonas cut in, laughing. "Danielle, that's adorable," he said, leaning forward into his webcam with a practiced smirk. "But we don't need red tape suits slowing us down. This isn't a government workshop. It's real business." The screen filled with chuckles, some awkward, some genuine. My audio was still live, but I said nothing. I looked at the little squares on the screen. No one said a word. Not even the client's GC rep, who I knew for a fact had flagged the same clause issues just a week ago in an internal memo, because she'd BCC'd me by mistake, thinking I was someone else. She avoided eye contact. Or maybe it was just her camera angle. Doesn't matter. I turned mine off. No one noticed. The next email came half an hour later. Subject: Forward, recap. A thread started by Travis, forwarded by Jonas. Their conversation sat at the bottom like a rotten core under shiny fruit. Her team's just dead weight, Travis had written. Only here to tick boxes for the paper trail. Let her play compliance Barbie if it keeps legal happy. Just don't let her slow us down. I wasn't supposed to be on that chain either. But there it was in my inbox with my name in the CC field like a final insult. My throat went dry. Not from rage, something colder. Something emptier. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't even screenshot it right away. I just stared for a few long seconds, letting the familiar dull weight settle in the back of my chest. The one that says, you are invisible to these people. They don't even see you when they insult you to your face. Then I opened the folder. I dragged the email in, no edits. I tagged it by sender, timestamp, and context. I cross-referenced it with my meeting notes from that day, attached the compliance doc I'd referenced, and added a note: intentional mischaracterization of compliance scope. Witnesses present. From there it got easier. Every email they sent without me but about me. Every version of the contract they edited without updating the track history. Every timeline adjustment that conveniently skipped required legal sign-off. I stopped thinking of myself as part of the project. I became an observer. Not a passive one. Just still. I started versioning everything. PDFs and Word files, sure. But also chat logs. Slide decks. Timestamped recordings when calls didn't have minutes. Anything they could pretend was never said later. I made sure it was said twice and saved both. One night I spent 3 hours comparing document metadata across drafts they thought no one would cross-check. It wasn't for revenge. It was instinct. The same instinct that told me Jonas had done this before. The same instinct that said someone in that office was betting big on speed, and betting no one would catch them until after the ink dried. They were wrong. They just didn't know it yet. Because I'd already started a second folder. This one was called Escalation. The tempo changed in week 4. What had started as a sprint to final alignment turned into a frenzied downhill slide toward the signature date. The language in the internal updates shifted. Due diligence became wrap-up. Concerns became edits. And somewhere in between, all the legal checkpoints vanished like they'd never mattered in the first place. At first, I thought I'd missed something. A clause, maybe some acceleration protocol I hadn't seen. So I went back through the document control logs. No mention. No justification. Just gone. A signature line from legal replaced with to be confirmed. A verification field marked optional. One audit trail, the one tied to subcontractor invoicing, was misdated entirely. It looked backdated but sloppily. A timestamp that contradicted its own file creation. I forwarded it to myself. Subject: chain inconsistency, payroll pathing. No commentary. Just the file and the flag. Then I heard Jonas in the OpenFloor pod during a Thursday call with 2 external vendor teams. I hadn't been invited, but he was on speaker. Someone in the shared office forgot their headset. We'll make this contract bulletproof after it's signed, he said, half laughing. Right now we just need to look clean enough to pass optics. Real compliance happens in post. I paused. Not because it shocked me, because it confirmed something. The deviations weren't mistakes. They were strategy. That night I created a new document in my encrypted drive. Chronology of gaps. I wasn't writing it for them. I was writing it for whoever would come after. I charted every misstep. Every delay that looked innocent but shaved off a layer of accountability. The gaps were small on purpose. Like hairline fractures in foundation concrete. You don't notice until the building lists 30 degrees. And by then no one remembers which hairline was first. I stopped offering feedback in group settings. It wasn't worth the eye rolls or silence. Instead, I'd highlight a section in the draft doc, leave a discreet comment, and download a backup before it could be deleted. When Travis deleted one of my comments and replaced it with a note to streamline wording for clarity, I saved both versions. I filed it under interference with risk visibility. It became almost meditative, this quiet work of assembling a paper shadow of their clean version. I could feel the false confidence thickening in every team huddle. Jonas walking around with that casual air of invincibility, flipping his tablet closed whenever I entered the room. Travis, smug and jittery, already referring to post-launch bonuses like they were guaranteed. They thought momentum was protection, that if they moved fast enough, no one would stop the train. I didn't try to stop it. I just documented exactly where the brakes had been cut. And somewhere between Draft 7 and Draft 8 of the final procurement package, I added a line to the header of my master copy, generated for retention purposes under Internal Clause 7.14.5. No one asked what that meant. And I didn't explain. We were 15 minutes behind schedule, and Travis hated being behind. His voice had that brittle, tight sound it always took on when he felt the meeting slipping out of his control. The investor liaison was asking questions, real ones, about delivery milestones and contractor overlap. Questions that scraped too close to the edge of what we were avoiding. Jonas kept trying to steer the conversation back to strategic vision, but I could see it unraveling. I wasn't supposed to speak. I hadn't even been on the invite until someone from legal added me at the last second, probably by accident. But when the question came up about Clause 14, specifically the exceptions for compliance override in fast-track procurement, I had to say something. I cleared my throat. Apologies, but Clause 14.3 contradicts standard federal fast-track exemptions. The wording here suggests that validation can occur post-signature, which isn't legally enforceable under. Jonas cut me off. Loudly. Danielle, he said, throwing my name like a warning shot. I don't care who you are or what little policies you think apply. This isn't your show. The room went quiet. You could hear the AC clicking behind the drywall. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I just pressed my pen against the inside seam of my notebook and wrote one word. Witnessed. After the meeting, while people filtered out and the air tried to settle, a voice caught me off guard. Hey! Someone whispered barely above a breath. I turned. It was the junior counsel, Elena, maybe 28, clearly new to this level of political fire. She looked nervous, but she held eye contact. You were right. About Clause 14. I flagged it too. They told me to drop it. I gave her a small nod. Nothing more. It was enough. That night I submitted a compliance memo. Brief, clinical, thoroughly cited. I submitted it through the official channel, attaching 2 source docs and a legislative precedent. No accusations, just observations. I BCC'd my personal address, encrypted the message, and logged the timestamp in my master chronology file. 2 days later, I checked the internal response queue. Submission marked. Non-actionable. Context noted. No escalation needed. The manager who filed that response? Travis. He wasn't even on the compliance committee. I flagged another issue in the shared procurement doc. This time a misalignment between subcontractor disclosure timelines and inspection readiness. If they missed this clause, they'd be open to breach penalties as soon as the build hit phase 2. I left the comment in the margin. Clearly sourced. Signed with my initials. The next morning the comment was gone. Not resolved. Not addressed. Deleted. Travis had uploaded a new version of the doc, with identical formatting but altered metadata. I ran a comparison tool. My flagged clause had been rewritten to bury the risk under vague language about contingent compliance assessment, a phrase that doesn't exist in the actual legal code. I added both versions to the escalation folder. I labeled the deletion as manual suppression of internal compliance feedback. It didn't feel like paranoia anymore. It felt like protocol. They weren't missing these things. They were removing them. And every time I flagged something, it vanished faster. Elena stopped making eye contact in the halls. Jonas didn't even pretend to CC me anymore. Travis? He walked past me once at the coffee station and smiled like we shared a secret. Like I'd accepted my place. But I hadn't. Not really. I was just building the case in silence. And now the question wasn't if they were hiding something. It was how much. I found it at 11:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. Version 12 of the master contract. They'd rushed it out just before the long weekend, assuming everyone would be too busy or too tired to read the fine print. But I wasn't tired. I'd been expecting them to try something like this. There it was. Buried halfway down Clause 18, Procurement Integrity. Exceptions may be granted retroactively by executive oversight contingent upon post-implementation review. The sentence looked harmless, official even, but it was a fiction. Under federal standards, there are no retroactive exceptions for procurement violations. None. Any attempt to bypass active compliance invalidates the contract. Full stop. They had baked in a self-destruct mechanism under the assumption that no one would look that far. Or that if they did, they wouldn't understand what it meant. Or worse, that they'd be too scared to say anything. I stared at that line for a long time. Not with shock, just stillness. I didn't need to mark it up. I didn't need to comment. I already knew what I was going to do. I opened a separate, secure inbox. Not my firm's. Not theirs. One tied to a whistleblower contact I'd worked with back in 2017, during a case involving a defense subcontractor who tried to pass counterfeit parts as certified. Subject: potential 41 CFR 105 to 71.112 violation. Embedded language. I attached the document, then I added everything else. Email trails, version histories, timestamps, the deleted comments, a scan of the printed memo I'd submitted, the one Travis marked as non-actionable. All of it. I ended the message with a single line. Flagged for review under Clause 7.14.5 Retention Protocol. Quiet submission. Then I hit send. No threats. No dramatic speeches. Just process. Quiet. Clean. Documented. The final prep meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room with skyline views and too much natural light. Jonas strutted in wearing a fitted navy blazer and that same shark grin he used on junior staff and investor reps. Travis was already seated, flipping through the slide deck with mock focus, sipping from a bottle of some overpriced electrolyte drink like we were prepping for a CrossFit seminar, not a federal contract. I'd submitted 3 final notes for review. None were acknowledged. Near the end of the run-through, Jonas turned to me and smirked. Let's not complicate things with last-minute legalese, Danielle. Nobody checks compliance before the money's wired. There was laughter. Again. I didn't laugh. I didn't argue. I just looked at the clock. In my pocket, my phone buzzed once, soft, deliberate. A single reply had come through. No subject line. Just this. Received. Review initiated. Timestamp locked. I turned the screen over and set it face down on the polished mahogany table. I had nothing left to say. They'd made their final version, and I had already made mine. The elevator ride to the 37th floor was silent. I stood wedged between 2 portfolio managers from Langton Partners, their suits still crisp from the car service and their lanyards already flipped to the correct side. They didn't speak to me. Not because they were rude, because they didn't know who I was. And that's exactly how I wanted it. The boardroom was floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind of space built not for acoustics but for optics. The city stretched behind the head of the table like a brag. Jonas was already inside, laughing with the lead investor and pointing toward the skyline like he owned the air rights. Travis stood at the display screen, tapping the projector remote like a conductor warming up his orchestra. I was seated in the back. No nameplate. No agenda line item. Just a slim manila folder on my lap and my phone face down beside it. I'd requested no speaking role. No slides. No questions. They thought I was background. I made sure of it. 10 minutes in, the meeting was running hot. Travis clicked through the deck like a magician. Charts, timelines, deliverables. Each one polished, each one slightly dishonest. Compliance was slide 27. The last check-the-box item before the Q&A. We've completed full legal review, Travis said, voice smooth. As you can see, all deliverables are verified and compliant across procurement and regulatory benchmarks. He clicked to the next slide. A giant green checkmark filled the screen. That was the moment. I stood up. Slowly. No sudden movement. No drama. I'd like to make one brief request, I said, not raising my voice. Before we proceed to investor questions, may I ask our attorney to read an email I received on September 12th? The room stilled. The rustle of paper stopped. Jonas turned, blinking like he'd misheard. Travis didn't move at all. I walked to the head of the table and handed my phone, already unlocked, to the company's senior counsel. Not mine. There. He looked at the screen. His brow furrowed. This is from your internal project manager, he said quietly. I nodded once. He read aloud. Word for word. The room didn't breathe. Dead weight. The manager had written. Compliance Barbie can flag all she wants. We're pushing fake verifications until we clear funding. Clean it later. No one laughed. The lead investor leaned forward. Did he just say fake verifications? The junior counsel, Elena, finally looked up from her notepad and spoke with quiet precision. There are multiple inconsistencies across all compliance documents, she said. Ms. Reed flagged them. She was ignored. Travis tried to speak. Jonas raised a hand like a traffic cop, only now his palm was shaking. Across the table, the seal gray suit, still as stone, turned toward legal. How real is this? The attorney didn't answer right away. He was still scrolling through my phone, tracing the email headers and timestamps, reading quietly. Then he looked up and said, I need 15 minutes. The government observer at the far end of the room was already on his phone, stepping into the hallway without a word. I sat down again in the back. No smile. No gloating. Just silence. The kind you plan for. The silence after the attorney finished reading was the kind that clings to the walls. No one moved. No one coughed. Even the HVAC hum seemed to dip, like the room itself was holding its breath. The CEO turned slowly to face the attorney, gray-haired, composed, but now blinking just a little too much. Are you telling me this is real? He asked, voice lower than before. Not disbelief. Something closer to fear. The attorney didn't answer right away. He simply turned the phone toward the screen and began scrolling again. This time through a chain of forwarded attachments I had queued up beneath the original message. The deleted comment logs. The version discrepancies. The contract language that had violated procurement standards in plain text. The BCC to the oversight address. It was all there, quiet, time-stamped, undeniable. Not only is it real, he said finally, voice flat, it's comprehensive. Jonas finally broke. Wait. This is taken out of context. I mean, you know how teams joke internally, right? That email was. Elena, junior legal, seat 3 from the left, cut him off with surgical precision. There are more inconsistencies, she said. Calm. Even. I compared all 12 versions of the contract over the last 2 weeks. Ms. Reed was right. Fields were altered. Language was inserted post-review. And internal comments were scrubbed after flagging risks. The CEO turned sharply toward Jonas and Travis. Did you authorize any of that? Neither of them answered. The lead investor set his pen down. You told us compliance was signed off. That's what you said last Tuesday. Jonas opened his mouth, but the sound that came out wasn't a sentence. Just breath. A dry click. Across the room, the government official from the Office of Federal Compliance, who had been silent all morning, stood and stepped out with his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. The CEO reached up and loosened his tie. His voice cracked slightly when he turned back to legal. What are our options? Not many, the attorney replied. Not without exposure. If this goes forward, we're on the hook for knowingly submitting falsified compliance documentation to a federal body. Jonas sank lower in his chair. Travis stared at the table like he could will it to open and swallow him whole. And me? I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. My hands rested calmly on my folder, unopened. I didn't need it now. Everything that mattered was already spoken, or permanently logged. What they were experiencing wasn't collapse. It was consequence. A slow-motion unraveling they couldn't stop because they'd convinced themselves it would never happen. No raised voice. No angry confrontation. Just a record of the truth, patient, quiet, undeniable. The kind of silence that doesn't just say, I told you so. The kind that says, you knew. And you did it anyway. The shift didn't explode. It folded in, quiet and cold, like the moment fog erases a skyline. The CEO stood up without a word, hands braced on the table. He stared at the slide on the screen, still showing that massive green checkmark under verified compliance, and then turned slowly toward the attorney. Pause all proceedings, he said. Not shouted. Not argued. Just spoken like a man who suddenly understood he'd been sold a lie with his own letterhead on it. The lead investor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. We'll need a full briefing, he said. Now. Not later. Another one pulled out a tablet and began swiping rapidly, no longer pretending to be calm. Legal counsel began moving quickly but deliberately, closing laptops, asking for devices, collecting phones like they were evidence. One associate reached toward Jonas, who flinched as if contact might burn him. Travis was pale, sweat darkening the collar of his perfect shirt. He started to say something, then stopped. No one was listening anymore. Across the table, the COO turned toward me with a voice that tried to find command but landed in desperation. Who else has seen this? I didn't smile. I didn't blink. Everyone who needs to, I said, voice steady. That sentence hung there, heavier than anything I could have shouted. The government observer re-entered the room just then, face unreadable. He said nothing, just returned to his seat and started typing. Behind him, the door shut with a soft click that sounded like a vault locking. The CEO sat down finally. His fingers laced together, resting on the conference table as if in prayer. I want a legal position in 10 minutes, he told the attorney. What's the least exposure we're looking at? The attorney didn't hesitate. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't look at Jonas or Travis or the stack of paper printouts in front of him. He looked only at the CEO. Cancel the contract, he said. Now. No dramatic sigh. No theatrical pause. Just 3 words spoken like a verdict. The air didn't shift after that. It just stilled completely. Like the oxygen had thinned out and the building itself was listening. Someone at the far end of the table began packing their bag with trembling fingers. Someone else muttered about damage control and internal statements. Travis was no longer in the room. I hadn't even seen him leave. I stayed seated. No folder. No laptop. Just stillness. Because it was done. Not won. Not avenged. Just over. No one said my name when I stood up. No hand reached out. No exit acknowledgement. The room stayed full of motion. Papers shuffled, calls whispered, futures unraveling in real time. But not a single person looked my way. And that was fine. I picked up my phone from the edge of the table, slid it into my coat pocket, and walked out. The hallway was quieter than usual. One of the assistants outside the boardroom gave me a nervous glance, like she knew something had happened but hadn't been told what. I gave her a nod and stepped into the elevator. 37 floors down, no conversation. Just my reflection in the steel doors, calm and forgettable. By Monday, Jonas's profile photo was gone from the internal directory. Suspended pending formal inquiry. On Wednesday, Travis's name came up in a press whisper. Stepping away during review. No quotes. No statement. No one rushing to defend him. The firm didn't make an announcement. There were no press releases. Just a quiet memo from the compliance committee, buried 3 clicks deep on the internal portal. Due to procedural inconsistencies and unmet regulatory checkpoints, the Langton contract has been formally withdrawn. That was it. $470 million gone like it never existed. The press caught on barely. A footnote in a government newsletter about contract voided due to unresolved compliance concerns. No names. No firms. Just process. I didn't speak to anyone afterward. I didn't need to. My final documentation was already archived. My report had been read, confirmed, copied. Elena sent one message the following week, a single sentence. Thank you for not backing down. I didn't reply. She didn't need me to. A few days later, I found a package in my firm's internal mail drop. No sender. No return address. Just a plain craft envelope sealed with a simple wax mark, oversight seal. Inside a pen. Heavy. Black matte finish. Engraved in small, silver lettering across the barrel were 3 words. Process is power. No note. No card. Just that. I held it for a moment, then clicked it once and placed it in the inside pocket of my binder. The same binder I'd carried into that room. The same one they never once asked to see. I walked out that day with nothing but silence behind me. No parade. No credit. No applause. And still the record stood. I didn't raise my voice. I just raised the record.